I'll tell you about that.
management. And now, to address the legal concerns of our community, AM 1310 The Light presents Legally Speaking. Here is...
Good morning, everyone. This is Nathaniel Lee. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for listening to our show each week, especially those people I ran into Kroger who drilled me about the show. You're free to call in too, and we could discuss it on the show, some of the issues you raised. Our number is 833-653-3529, 833-653-3529. Today we have our superstar panel again, Attorney Milton out of LA, and Representative Rodney King, and a lot of other famous cases he did over his career. And of course, a crack research analyst, master's in taxation, cybersecurity expert, Attorney Vanita Banks, originally from Indy. We claim her, and she lives in Chicago. And I'd like to thank them for helping us out every week. Today, we have a lot of different subjects to cover in so little time, but we had a legal bomb hit us this week. For the first time in American history, there's an indictment of a former president of the United States. And an indictment is when, let me just explain the process before we get started, is when someone is indicted, the charges are sometimes kept under seal until the defendant first appear in court. The charges that the grand jury approved against former President Donald J. Trump are currently not public. Now, once you're indicted, in some cases, arrangements are made with defendants or their lawyers for self-surrender or voluntarily turning themselves in to law enforcement and the jail official. Former President Trump would likely be allowed to turn himself in voluntarily. His travel would need to be coordinated with the Secret Service and other law enforcement. Of course, former presidents have 24/7 Secret Service protection, which is kind of odd. So the first appearance in a court are usually a public proceeding. With their first appearance, the defendant will use the book and fingerprint in a typical case. A defendant will learn more about their rights, and their charges are read and the conditions of release are set forth. Most of the time, Attorney Grimes will tell you that there's usually travel restrictions. And so now that's the background as I know it, and I'm not sure what the charges are, but my panel may have been reading this too, and that's where we are now. Start out with our criminal law. Attorney Grimes, you've been following this story about the indictment?
Well, it kind of surprised me that they finally caught the fox or charged the fox. They haven't railed him in yet, but I think it was forthcoming. I think they should have filed charges against him based upon what his previous attorney, Michael Cohen, said happened with Miss Daniels as his, I don't know if it was a mistress or not, or he just paid her fee for her services that she performed for him, hush money, so to speak. And I don't know all the facts, Nate, but I'm surprised that they finally caught him and charged him.
Attorney Banks?
Well, after 40 years.
Good morning, Vanita. Thank you.
As Attorney Grimes said, of appearing to be above the law, we finally see former President Trump indicted in the state of New York. The indictment is the people of the state of New York versus Trump. And he faces more than 30 counts related to business fraud in connection with this payment that his former attorney, who went to prison in connection with this transaction. And this payment was made days before the 2016 election to Stormy Daniels to allegedly silence her for going public about an affair that she's alleged to have had with him over a decade earlier than the payment was made. And those payments were documented as legal fees. And so it's anticipated, although the indictment is under seal and may be read on Tuesday. And again, he faces 30 counts related to business fraud because that payment was allegedly documented as a legal fee and a repayment back to his former attorney, Michael Cohen. And so one of the counts may be business fraud, falsifying business records, which may be a misdemeanor. That misdemeanor could become a felony if there was intent to commit a felony. And then also you have whether or not there were improper use of campaign funds in connection with this $130,000 payment. And so we don't know what the exact charges are going to be, of course, until that indictment is unsealed.
Now, what I was troubled by is that the news reporters were very skeptical and they kept leaving out some important piece of evidence, I thought. The number one piece of evidence is that Michael Cohen, the president, on camera stated that he's my lawyer, he's taking care of the matter on camera. The second thing is news that National Enquirer, Catch and Kill, paid $150,000 to another woman to keep the relationship quiet. And that person also testified before the grand jury. So everybody who's making these opinions, they keep leaving out relevant, pertinent evidence to show that this is not a complicated case to prosecute. You know, I'm not in the defense side, but it seemed like they have a mountain of evidence in addition to Michael Cohen having all these checks. But, you know, at the end of the day, you got to say, well, why would you pay these women $280,000? Is there smoke? Maybe there's a fire somewhere? I don't know, Milton. What are your thoughts?
He has slid under, by, over so many things that we see as obvious. Nathaniel, I don't know what surprises he's going to pull off here to explain the payment of these funds to these different people, but he's surely going to come up with something. We know that, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, he has a very vociferous lawyer who has been appearing on all of the news shows, from Al Sharpton's show to, of course, CNN and other shows, and is stating that in order for there to be a federal campaign violation, that the payments must have been done solely, you know, for the purpose of fraud related to, you know, the campaign. And he's arguing that the payment was made to protect his family as well. And therefore, there's no liability on any type of federal charge with respect to a federal campaign violation. But you're right, Milton. Today, over 40 years, he's been very cunning in dodging numerous allegations. From my perspective, his threats against Alvin Bragg constitute some type of criminal act. What do you think? When you're pictured on social media with a baseball bat next to a picture of the DA, shouldn't that constitute some crime?
Well, it's baseball season. As a matter of fact, they played their first game this past week. So I think the bat is associated with the advent of opening game.
Hey, but here's what I thought, counsel, I thought was the biggest side issue of this. This lawyer that appeared on TV on every station every day, Joe Tacopina, been on TV talking about this, giving his opinion. and claiming that they're going to dismiss the indictment before he's seen it. I don't understand his representation. His firm originally represented Stormy Daniels. And I'm trying to figure out how can the law firm now represent Trump? And that's going to be an interesting initial ruling by this court. I think that the prosecutor is going to probably move to have him recused from the case. I don't know how you can ethically do that. I mean, it's not permissible, but maybe there's some loop.
Maybe he has the firewalls in his office that separated him from the Stormy Daniels case, and there's all kind of little complicated rules in the state bar regarding representation of former clients against former clients. But you know, how do I say this without sounding too biased? But we see hypocrisy and conflict throughout our profession that's ignored all the time, Nathaniel. Depends upon what level it is. And
I think there may be some hypocrisy in the jury verdict against Mike Ridley Thomas this week there in LA, Attorney Grimes. And I know we're going to talk about that case this morning as well. But Trump is saying, and his lawyer is saying, look, I was blackmailed, right? And these two women, and I paid these two women because I'm running for president, right? And now you want to come back and criminally prosecute me? So of course, you know, as usual, he's the victim.
But I agree with what Nathaniel, I mean, not agree necessarily, but I see what Nathaniel is talking about. Anytime that I've engaged the services of some of the major firms in LA or worked with them, there's always this conflict search, no matter who your client is, especially if it's a well-known person, and they'll come back 2 or 3 days later and declare conflict. They can't because 20 years ago, one of their associates or partners worked on this particular case and they can't get involved in this one. So I don't know, guys.
One final thing before we got our caller, that lawyer Tacopina in 2018, when they represented Stormy Daniels, he went on TV on CNN and told the whole world that the hush money payment was against the law. So I'm thinking, are you freaking kidding me? So the number one thing you do as a prosecution, if you make an opening, you put a videotape of the lawyer telling the whole world that what his client did is criminal. I'm thinking, how can he get that excluded?
You know, you remind me when you said that like that, Nathaniel, of the case dealing with Don King. He came into a fight in one of the islands and he came with, I forgot the champion at the time, and he was hurrahing for that champion. And they said about midway of the fight, King moved to a neutral corner. And then at the end, the challenger knocked the champion out and Don ran in the ring and grabbed the hand of the new champion. And the news media asked, well, I thought you came with A. King said, no, you got it wrong. I came with the champ and I'm leaving with the champ. So.
Fascinating, sir. Okay, Pierre Pullen, you have a question coming for today, sir.
Oh, good afternoon, attorneys. Can you hear me well, Nate?
Loud and clear. Good morning, sir.
Okay. Yeah, this is a heavy news week, heavy legal news week. You got, like I said, Ms. Banks mentioned the conviction of the LA councilman out there, Mr. Thomas. And, you know, I was reading through the story and I was actually surprised to find that Mr. Bernard Parks, who he lost that seat to, I believe, actually told him at one point the FBI was asking questions about his activities, but I guess Mr. Thomas didn't care. And he went on to get charged and convicted. And I know Milton may have some insight on that. And then, you know, you had the Gwyneth Paltrow thing came in. And then in Georgia, you got prosecutors under attack, their discretion under attack by the governor and the legislature down there. And one final thing, that conviction of, I think his name is Adnan Syed or something like that. His conviction was reinstated out there in Maryland, and to me that was just personal, by a Maryland appeals court and the chief judge, just personal. And so, you know, a lot of things going on in the country. Nate, can I ask your permission to say one thing about the case I have at the Seventh Circuit?
Well, but I could talk to off the record, but you know.
Well, I just wanted to bring it up publicly, but thanks a lot anyway. It doesn't get any media attention here in this town anyway. So, but thank you for taking my call.
Okay, thank you, sir. And okay, the next issue that council brought up was the conviction of the councilman in LA. And for a background, I think that's the case where he promised to steer contracts to get somebody a job at USC or something, his son. And I can't remember all the details of it, but I saw something vaguely about it some years ago. And I don't remember the details. What happened in that case, Count? Either of you guys remember?
Well, I'm gonna quote a passage from yesterday's paper. Among the benefits, this is a benefits that was given to Mark Ridley Thomas's son, who had gotten into a situation up in Sacramento with the state legislature where he allegedly sexual harassment, and he resigned from his legislative position there. And they accused Mr. Thomas of bartering with USC to get contracts that would be beneficial to them if he would contribute $100,000, right, Vanita?
That's right.
Yeah, $100,000, and his campaign fund came up with the $100,000 that they donated to a program that was being run through USC. It's kind of convoluted, complicated facts, but in a way they say among the benefits that were received, not by Mark Ridley Thomas, but by his son, was admission and a full scholarship before he had even finished his application to USC, and a part-time professor's position, and later the routing of $100,000 through USC to the Policy Research and Practice Initiative, a nonprofit run by the younger Ridley Thomas. Allegedly, this all came about because of a father's attempt to help his son, who had strayed a little bit off the path, Nate. And they supposedly had a lot of evidence with text messages or emails between Mark Ridley Thomas and this dean of the social of the school that this contract or agreement was made with. I also read that the foreperson of the jury said the jury was not unanimous in a lot of things that seem to be threaded through this case. So I don't know how they came up with the guilty verdict the way they did. And that's my disjointed summary of it. Vanita, you have a better summary than that?
Of course, I do not have a better summary of the one you just delivered, Attorney Grimes. So let me just say that Mr. Thomas was found guilty on 8 of 15 counts, on an account of bribery as well as conspiracy. And as you stated, Attorney Grimes, for abusing his position of power to benefit his son at the University of Southern California. And the former dean of the school, she pled guilty. And of course, she's no longer the former dean. So I don't know whether, she ultimately, provided testimony, which also led to Mr. Thomas's conviction. But Mayor Karen Bass stated that on the day of the jury's verdict, that it was a very sad day for the people of Los Angeles because of all of the wonderful work that Mr. Thomas has done. And of course, no man is above the law, right? And that under the rule of law, people should be held accountable for their crimes. When I think about well, let me make this point. With respect to the scholarship and the job as a professor at USC, it's my understanding that his son would have been eligible for a scholarship and a job anyway, based on his qualifications, again, not justifying fraud or violation of the law. But when we reflect on how Trump and his children, okay, and were they qualified to serve in the White House for 4 years? They've never been, and he's never been held accountable, nor any of his family members, until this historic indictment this week.
Okay,
Standard.
we'll take a call. Did we lose it? Oh, here we are. Caller, you have a question or comment for us today. What's your name, please?
Hi, good morning. This is Alvin calling from Chicago.
Hi, Alvin. How are you doing today,
First
sir?
and foremost, doing quite well. Hope everybody's okay down there with all the storms that came through the Midwest on yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah.
So far, yes, thank you.
Okay. I've been following this situation in Florida with this so-called House Bill 999, where supposedly, if it is passed, and we haven't gotten confirmation that it has been passed, that it would immediately strip state funding from any deemed person of color themed organization, or as it says in the actual bill, any school from using diversity, equity, and inclusion statements, critical race theory, rhetoric, or other forms of political identity filters as part of the hiring process, part of application for employment, promotion of tenure, conditions of employment, or reviewing qualifications for employment. And then there's a particular line, I believe it's 341, that says, and I quote, the bill would ban state colleges and universities from financially supporting any programs or campus activities that espouse diversity, equity, and inclusion, or critical race theory rhetoric. Basically a veiled threat at knocking out any schools that have Black fraternities or sororities on campus. And I find that interesting because if that is the case, then those predominantly white organizations that also include persons of color should also be stripped. Should it not, counsel?
Well, actually, I think that the Florida governor uses terms that are clearly racist. He used the term woke, and they use that to say that the woke people, and woke is a good thing. In other words, woke meant that slaves would know to stay awake so they don't get slaughtered or murdered or lynched during the Black codes. So now the term woke by this governor become a nasty thing or a bad word. And in fact, it says that he used just the opposite in a racist manner. Now, I am familiar with that bill, but there's worse bills that they introduced. Hell, there's a whole line of bills down in Florida, none of which I like. For example, they changed the tort rule in Florida. I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff, not just the racist things they're dealing with. The things they're dealing with down there are anti-consumer, anti-average person. I mean, they passed a tort bill to limit damages, to limit the time to file a lawsuit. There's a whole list of things about Florida. It's too many to discuss during this show. But the one thing, though, the one thing you're correct about, that proposal is too vague. It would eliminate Black fraternities and sororities, Jewish sororities, or history and women's studies and LGBTQ issues. So it's a too broad of a bill. It wouldn't. I don't think it would be constitutional, but who knows?
It has
I also kind of go ahead, counsel.
I'm sorry, I was just asking the question because I haven't kept up with it. It's up for vote, right?
No, it goes to the legislator.
I
I've been watching that. Every week there's been some crazy law that this governor down in Florida trying to do. I mean, he got rid of prosecutor. There's so many crazy things he's doing. And apparently people don't see this as being abnormal when he tried to ship people from Texas who came across to New York on Florida dime. I mean, you could have a 1 month discussion on the crazy stuff this governor's doing and getting away with it. It's just so abnormal in American politics, what's he doing? And I think he's trying to increase his profile in that hardcore Republican base to win the primary against Trump. That's going to be real interesting.
Well, there's another spoke to that, and I'm glad you brought up President Trump with the recent indictment. There have been some murmurings on a number of shows that saying that Trump could use any part of his potential booking as a rallying cry for his base to try and get folks in his corner. And I'm just wondering how we in the Black community should respond to that particular potential rile up that would be, I guess, akin to January 6th.
Just keep the facts in front of us and not let his theatrics, his heroics, his lies be what I guess he uses so frequently. It's old news now, but he makes up his facts. He doubles down on his lies. So as long as we just keep our eyes in front and look at the facts for ourselves, then maybe I think we can stand up to this man. But he changes the truth every day.
I believe that the Black community and all of our organizations need to make it very, very clear through all of the platforms and forums that we lead that the mistreatment, attacks, threats against the DA, Alvin Bragg, who's only doing his job, must cease. And that they are unacceptable. Our opposition to attacks against DA Bragg should be deafening.
Hey, by the way, Chicago caller.
DEAFENING. And we should expect, in response to our caller, that he will use this Tuesday's indictment as a rallying cry to his base. I understand he's already raised, over $1 million and $4 million. And so I don't understand how legally you can do that in this country.
But this brother has a point. Just thinking about it.
Well, look at us and look at him.
Yeah, he's going to have some African-American celebrities that will probably come out and support him. You're right about that. We just got to keep our focus, man.
One final question for our Chicago gentlemen. You have an election on April 4th there in your mayor's race, right?
That is correct.
What's it looking like?
From what I've seen lately in the various media polls, it's a dead heat between former Chicago Public School CEO Paul Vallis and current Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson. And they've gone back and forth in regards to public safety, over this defund the police rhetoric that Brandon has put up, over some potentially racially tinged tweets that Paul Vallis has put up. It's going back and forth. And then there are some very prominent African Americans that have jumped in both camps, making this a very closely watched race, because if Brandon Johnson can somehow get the seat, this would keep the top 4 markets in the nation all governed by Black people: New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and Houston. And Paul Vallis may be looking to break that bind there. It is a very closely watched race here in Chicago.
Well, thanks for the hope that hopefully it's get voter turnout. Well, thank you,
They
sir.
are tied at this point. As the caller said, it's a dead heat. And Brandon Johnson is endorsed by the teachers union, very, very strong union in Chicago. And Paul Vallis is supported by the police union. And of course, there are issues regarding crime. As the caller stated, a lot of attention focused on this race. Bobby Rush, U.S. Representative Bobby Rush, has endorsed Paul Vallis. Martin Luther King
Yes.
Jr. III
That's a surprise to me.
stepped up to support Brandon Johnson, and Bernie Sanders was in town this week to support Brandon Johnson. So it's extremely interesting.
Wow. Rush is supporting that. I'm surprised to hear that. Okay.
Is our caller still on? I'm wondering what his perspective
Still here.
is.
Well, here are the interesting endorsements, and Madam Counsel, thank you for bringing that up. You mentioned those that are behind Vallis, not only Congressman Rush, I believe Alderwoman Sophia King is behind Rush. I know Willie Wilson, who was one of the early mayoral candidates and had that big giveaway over the course of the pandemic. He's behind behind Paul Vallis. Whereas for Brandon Johnson, you've got Jesse Jackson is behind him. I know his son Jonathan, the congressman, is behind him. A number of clergymen are behind Brandon Johnson. So again, there's this vote, this African American vote here in Chicago, when it comes to this coming Tuesday's runoff, is going to definitely tilt this race one way or another. Despite any other ethnic group, the African American vote in Chicago is going to be the definer in who gets the 5th floor office this year.
It sounds like, from what, if I don't know all the players as well as you guys, but it sounds like the African American vote, is it being split into 3 different pieces?
Well, it was split into 9 different pieces, considering the candidates, because considering that Paul Vallis was the only non-Black candidate in the race. And the way it turned out initially on February 28th, Paul Vallis held off Brandon Johnson, I believe, by about 25,000 votes, with about 17,000 of those now going to the soon-to-be former mayor, Lori Lightfoot. So imagine that particular group going to either Johnson or Vallis, and now you've got basically not even a runoff at this point. So that's where it looks at right now. Now you add all these other endorsements that are coming through at this last segment, and from what I've been hearing, early voting this time around is a little brisker than it was in the initial voting on February 28th.
Well, it depends on where the early voting coming from, doesn't it? Is it coming from south side of Chicago or coming from the suburban area?
Well, the suburban areas aren't counted in the Chicago. This is strictly within the Chicago city limits.
What do you think? I don't live in Chicago, but do you have a sense, caller, for who might eke out as the victor on Tuesday, given those dynamics you just described?
Well, again, this could go either way. I think this might be one of the closest runoffs that we've had in recent memory, just because not only of who's endorsing who, but the issues that are being brought up. Not only is public safety in the mix, but you're also looking at access to mental health options in the city. You're looking at potential taxation issues in the city because the taxation definitely goes a long way to helping the Chicago public schools. And Paul Vallis being a former CEO of that, there's no telling how many in that teachers union he may have picked off as far as endorsements is concerned. And not only that, but this race could go a long way to potentially seeing how the next gubernatorial race could pop up in the next 3 years from now.
Well, we'll watch it.
Important race.
Well, we watch the returns on Tuesday night. It's going to be drowned out by the Trump indictment and appearance in court, though. And to my understanding, that indictment killed your last debate between the candidates. Is that what happened?
But right around the time that it happened.
Although there have been many, many debates between these candidates over the last couple of weeks.
Well,
but that's true, Attorney Lee.
We'll be watching the return. Well, the next case has to do, we talked about it briefly, was the snow skiing case that we have an expert skier, Attorney Grimes, and I got a confession. I'm not going near any ski slope. The only way I might be around ice is when I put it in my soda pop or something. I'm not going near snow if I can avoid it. But that trial, it was a goofy trial. I watched a part of it. It just didn't. I watched the lawyer do the cross-examination, and she was like a teenage love affair or something. It was bizarre to me.
What? So what was the outcome? I don't know.
Well, Paltrow got her $1 plus you get attorney fees and costs.
So the doctor who claimed the $300,000, he lost?
Yeah, yes. They say he was 100% at fault.
Okay.
And the jurors speaking out on it.
Behind. Remember, I told you, you have the responsibility to warn the people in front of you. I'm going right, I'm going left. You don't just run up on somebody. Yeah, that's good.
Well, I don't know, Attorney Bank, you watching the trial, I thought that cross-examination, I watched about 5 minutes, and that defense lawyer was acting like like her biggest fan was Paltrow. It was just weird. I mean,
they've called her, quote, that she came across like a, quote, fangirl.
That's true.
She was cross-examining Gwyneth Paltrow. Some commentators state that she was trying to, be very nice to her, as she was trying to cross-examine her to support the theory that she crashed into him because she asked about her height, for example. And she said, oh, I'm about 5'10". And she says, well, I've got to wear these 4-inch or 5-inch heels to, this is the attorney for the doctor. I've got to wear these 5-inch heels in order to be 5'5". And Gwyneth Paltrow says, oh, well, they're very nice shoes. I mean, it was just really loony, some of the testimony. But after 8 days of evidence and the jury, there were 8 jurors in this case. And after about 2.5 hours, 3 hours of deliberation, they were all in agreement that Gwyneth Paltrow was not liable. Remember, the optometrist had originally filed a suit for $3.1 million in damages. And that case was dismissed, and he later refiled it for $300,000. She countersued for $1 plus attorney's fees. And basically, you know, she took the position that, yes, she could have settled this case, but she took this case to trial on principle, and she refused to acquiesce to a false claim. She felt that that compromised her integrity. And at the end of the day, the jury found her testimony to be credible, and that her story was most likely true. Then also there was a skiing expert that supported her version of the ski accident. And so, and after the trial, she walked over to the doctor and, you know, wished him the best.
Yeah.
Well, I was troubled because I've done a lot of trials. That was a case that I thought was a crappy case that no lawyer should have taken to trial. That is that he was claiming permanent injury, and then he posted, and he's doing everything after the accident he did before, but yet he was claiming he had this permanent injury. But what's troubling me more than anything else, it was almost like he was just seeking publicity.
Right.
You know, you got a famous person, and I'm thinking, why are you suing somebody for a ski accident? I thought it was an assumption of risk any freaking way. You know, Attorney Grimes, you explained that, right, left, and all that stuff. And, you know, you're out there. I mean, it's one of those hobbies that got some inherent danger. You can go off the cliff and kill yourself. And so you're going to sue the resort. So there are certain type of things that it trivializes people who get injured, have permanent injuries, have to have pain stimulators and things like that, and have real injuries, and their whole life is upset. They can't work anymore. They're become disabled. And those people conditioned are not treated as serious because you have these nutcase jobs doing these nothing cases. And people watch that stuff. And so sometimes $1 billion of insurance companies get away on cases because they see these crappy cases. And I think that was disservice to our legal community by having a case like that, personally.
Well, didn't the doctor make a comment, if I recall from our last airing, that inferred that he was in it for the publicity or something, Vanita or Nate?
Absolutely. There was a text that was introduced during the trial that he forwarded to his daughter, which said, "I am famous," you know, because he's got this case against this huge celebrity.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I don't know, I never followed her career. I'm not sure what show or what she does. I know it's kind of weird. I'm not a fan of this defendant because I've never watched any of her performances, what she's done.
I don't know who she is either.
She's an Academy Award winning actress, but she has not appeared in movies for a long time. She hasn't taken a role in several years. She is currently a wellness and lifestyle entrepreneur. She has a line called Goop, G-O-O-P. And I'll tell you in a minute what her net worth is, but it's well over $200 million.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
her Goop company is worth $250 million.
Wow. Well,
she has a very avid following as well.
So people know when she gets sued, her homeowners coverage will provide her liability. So even if she had lost the case, her defense, along with the claim, will be paid by our homeowners insurance. That's a covered provision on any standard homeowners policy. We have
Attorney Lee,
Yes.
I know we've discussed that. In those types of cases that you mentioned, does the insurance company have the right to appoint counsel? Because certainly her counsel wasn't appointed by the insurance company. What do you think?
Well, what occurs
Wouldn't
is
the
that,
insurance company force a settlement in this case?
well, what happens is two things occurs. The number one thing is that sometimes people are not aware that they have liability coverage for these type of claims. The typical homeowners policy, particularly like a homeowners 5, is like all risk type liability claims, right? And sometimes you have liability policy that covers named perils, right? But a person of her wealth, which generally have like a homeowners policy that will cover this. Also, if she had a business, she have a business overhead protection. Her business BOP coverage will also provide protection. Now, in the question of selection of counsel, sometimes in some rare cases, the insurance company, we've had a couple cases where the insurance company allowed their counsel to do the case and they contract with them, and their fees may be typically the insurance rate. But I had one case where the insurance company paid the lawyer's usual rate. The insurance company lawyer's rate, attorney fees are typically lower than the typical rate that lawyers charge corporation and businesses. And so to answer your question, it just depends. She could work out something where she said, I want my private counsel, and they can work out a hybrid. So, but in most of the cases I've done, I've only had a few cases where the insurance company paid for private counsel. Now, the third thing though, if they were asked for punitive damages, which would not be covered by the insurance, then she would have a private counsel. So because he originally asked for punitive damages, I was thinking about it, that may be a reason for which she would have a private counsel.
But Vanita's question that I was thinking about, Nate, is could the insurance company force her to settle? My initial reaction to that is she's being sued, so she has a right to reject settlement. I don't think the insurance company can take that right away from a party, can they, Nate?
I don't know. That's ambiguous because if they say
That
settle,
violates the Constitution and our principle of law. You cannot make me pay $1 to settle this case in America, because this is my case. You're my insurance company. Now, you may refuse to pay if I lose. That's another matter, but you can't make me sell it. It's like making a defendant take a plea.
well, what would happen is the insurance company will have you get your own lawyer and get a second opinion, because the insurance company want to dump the case. And, that's a tough one. You do have the right, but as a practical matter, they're paying the bill and they usually force people into settlement when they want to settle. They're billion-dollar entities and they generally have control of the situation. So despite the fact the person has a right to avoid settlement, the insurance company said to hell with that. We're not going to pay out another $250,000 to settle a case for $10,000. And they'll take that position. And sometimes the insurance company won't settle a case, even though it's against the insured best interest. So we've had a string of cases where we got excess verdicts that was higher than the policy limits. In those cases, the insurance company, and most of the time, have paid the verdict, even though the coverage is $100,000. We had a case where we got $550. The insurance company paid the $550.
As I said that, I thought of a case I had where we agreed on a settlement and it had to pass the joint committee, other cities involved in this over coverage. And they agreed that it should be paid. And the insurance company said, no, we're not paying that. And it's a complicated matter, but they rejected it and reneged on what we had preliminarily agreed on and did not honor their insured's position. So I guess I have to think about that a little more.
Yeah, the file motion to enforce the settlement.
It wasn't in writing.
Wow.
And that prevented the enforcement of it. Yeah,
Fascinating.
we had to continue negotiating. It came out okay, but Yeah, that was my lesson about that.
Well, one thing I forgot to announce, I think next weekend is a Holy Weekend. Next weekend is Easter weekend, right?
Yes.
So we'll be off for Easter break. That's a holiday. I forgot to mention that. So we won't have a show in honor of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so, oh, yes, right. This Friday is Good Friday. Wednesday is a Passover day. So this is a religious weekend next weekend. So we won't be broadcasting next weekend in recognition of the holiday. So don't forget, we'll be back in 2 weeks. And so our next show will be on April the 15th of 2023. Any final and closing comment, Council, before we end today?
Watch Trump theatrics and be cautious of what he does, because there's another bat in his closet beneath those.
Chicago voters, exercise your fundamental right to vote on Tuesday in the mayoral election as well as other elections on Tuesday.
Indianapolis, early voting for our mayor's race starts next week, and get out there and vote. And let's make sure we get more than 10% turnout in the primary. Thank you all for listening in. And the people that I see out and about, you're free to call in and discuss this over the show. And thank you all for listening today. And God bless and keep you. And we'll talk to you again after the religious holiday. Thank you and have a blessed weekend.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a great day.